Hey guys, so before I get into the details and sharing my best tips that I learned from the sub 225 marathon that I just did, please remember to like, comment, subscribe. If you do share my video, please tag me in it. I've obviously got a very small YouTube following at the moment, but I promise to do a video at least every 2 weeks of things that'll help you improve as a runner, things I've learned along my journey. I've obviously gone from a 3:17 marathon down to now a 2:24. I've learned a hell of a lot along the journey, and my goal is to not try and beat anybody. It's not to try and be better than you. It's just to try and be a better runner within myself, achieve the goals I set myself, and take and help as many people along the journey as possible. So if you'd comment, like, subscribe, like I said, that'll help a lot. Cool, time to get into the fun stuff. So there's a lot of details I could go into, but I've narrowed it down to my top 5 tips that I've got from training for this Cheshire Marathon that I recently did. I obviously got an entry with 19 days to go, and given the fact that I got an entry so late, I wasn't able to do the usual training I would for a marathon. I'd usually do, like, let's say a 12 or a 16-week marathon block. In this case, it kind of sprung up on me out of nowhere. So I took the opportunity, hustled the last minute entry, and got to the start line. And in a way, I learned so much, and I did things so differently to what I've previously done. And there's pros and cons to it, and there was a lot I could take out of it, which I'm happy to share with you. So I've narrowed it down to my top 5. So here they are. Okay, so tip number 1. The longest run that I did for this marathon was 30 kilometers. Actually, the longest run I've done in the previous 8 months building up to the marathon was 30 kilometers. So that just goes to show you that there's a lot of people out there wanting to get those super long runs in. And actually doing regular consistent training outweighs those super long runs by a huge margin. What I would recommend for someone doing their first marathon is to try and get at least a 30k run in, if not a 32k run in. That helps both physically and mentally. Physically, obviously, it just helps you get into better shape. Mentally, it helps from the point of view that you know when you get to the 32k mark at the marathon, while you only have 10k's left and you can hang in there. In my case, and running at the level I do and targeting a sub 225 marathon, I would often do, let's say, 4 or 5 longer runs, and longer runs as in above 32k runs, and I would try and do at least one 40k run with a big portion at marathon pace, just getting the body used to that. However, like I said, I got the entry with 19 days to go. There was no time to do a last minute crash course, so the longest run I did was 30k's. One thing that was consistent within my long runs was that they were easy and comfortable and controlled with a 1 kilometer hotspot. So 1 kilometer hotspot is basically a pickup within the run. You run that one section, that 1 kilometer as fast as possible, before taking a bit of a breather and going back to your normal, comfortable and controlled running. So that 1 kilometer was obviously quite a bit faster than my marathon pace. However, I did not do many marathon pace sessions. Even when it came to tempo sessions, I did a lot of tempo sessions that were shorter, and a lot quicker than what I would do marathon pace at. And I didn't ever really do, I did one marathon pace session, and the only other time I ran at marathon pace was on race day. So you can always learn a lot as a runner, and I'm constantly learning as a runner and as a coach. But that just goes to show you that even though I didn't do any super long runs, my weekly mileage was very consistent. I was averaging quite high weekly mileage from the beginning of the year. I was averaging 130k's a week. But that just goes to show you that's actually a lot more consistent running is way better than those ones of super long runs. Just to give you some insights into what a typical training week would look like for me. So starting at Monday morning, I would do a 12k recovery run. Within that 12k, there would be 4 times 200 meter strides in there. In the PM, I would do an 8k recovery run. On a Tuesday morning, I would do a 8k recovery run once again. On a Tuesday evening, I would do track Tuesday, so probably around 10k's in total with 5 kilometers at track volume. The other 5 kilometers would be warm up and cool down. On a Wednesday, well, that would be longer run day, so I would do probably a 20k. On a Thursday, I would do a tempo workout, probably around 18k, perhaps something like 3 times 4 kilometers within the run. And then on a Friday is always easy Friday, so I would do an easy 8k. On a Saturday, I would once again do a bit of a tempo session with some interval stuff. So probably around 20K, and it would include something like 2 times 10 minutes of tempo with 10 times 1 minute pickups in between. And then my Sunday longer run was probably around 25, 26 kilometers. And that would be an easy controlled run with a 1 kilometer hotspot in the middle. Okay, so tip number 2. This is a nutritional tip. So what I've done in the past in the build up to a race is I've done a thing called the Sultan diet. Now for the Sultan diet, you deplete your body of carbs for 3 days. So you have 0 carbs for 3 days, and then you carb load for 3 days. The point of that is that it kind of gives the carb loading effect double the effect, given the fact that your body hasn't had it. However, that in the past, it has worked for me, but it's given me pretty severe headaches. It makes you feel really, really super weak before you get the carbs in and feel good again. And I just don't know how healthy that is. And also another point on that is that it's not actually scientifically proven that it works. So in this case, what I did was I actually just kept to my normal diet, except I had reduced calories instead of cutting out the carbs. So for 3 days, I had a reduced calorie intake. So I probably had a slight negative calorie intake, which means I was burning a bit more than what I was consuming. And then for 2 days prior to race day, I started carb loading and I had an increased calorie intake. So a typical meal for me, or my pre-race meal in this case, for breakfast the day before, I had oats with a bit of muesli. And then for lunch, I had sweet potato with some tuna. And then for dinner, what I had was a whole meal pasta with a bit of chicken. Obviously not too much sauce, given the fact that I was running a marathon the next day. And then on race day, I had the stock standard, my go-to meal, which is peanut butter and whole wheat bread. I've done my last 30 marathons and I haven't had any stomach issues. I've never needed to go to the toilet once within the last 30 marathons. So like I've said before, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I've worked out something that's worked for me and I have not changed it one bit. And thankfully it's served me well, and hope it continues to serve me well going forward. So have a play with what works for you, what doesn't work with you. Once you find out what works for you, stick with it and don't change it. Okay, tip number 3, and this comes down to race day nutrition. So on this race, I actually had a lot less than what I usually would. My consumption throughout the whole race was 3 gels, Maurten gels, and probably around 400 milliliters of Maurten drink mix. And that's it. Nothing more, nothing less. So when it came to the gels, I had 2 normal gels and 1 caffeine gel. I had a gel at the start of the race and I had a gel at the 15 kilometer mark. I then had my last gel, which was my caffeine gel, at the 28 kilometer mark. So I tried to space it a third. When it came to the drink mix, I probably had 3 sips of water every lap. A lap was 5.5 Ks. So call it 3 sips every 5.5 Ks of Maurten drink mix. Apart from that, I didn't have any other liquid or gels or bars or anything like that. In the past, however, I have, for example, at London Marathon, gone to every water station, splashed my face in water, put water all over me. I think what it comes down to a lot is I started running in South Africa, and in South Africa, it's very hot. When conditions are different, you obviously do need to take on a lot more nutrition and liquid. But one thing I would say is that even though I took 3 gels and 400 milliliters of drink mix throughout the whole race, my build up to race day was really good nutrition wise. So my body had stored a lot of energy, which it used on race day. If you're obviously running for longer, or conditions are tougher, like it's a lot more hot and there's a lot more wind, then your body's going to need more nutrition. But on that day, that was all I needed. And in the past, I would have taken probably 2 more gels, a lot more drink mix, and I would have taken on a lot more water. But in this case, I took on a lot less. It was the perfect amount for the race, and it's probably what I'll continue to do going forward if conditions are similar. Okay, tip number 4. Quite an important one, this. So on marathon day, I decided to just simply run my own race. There was a bit of pre-race competition with other runners in the field, but I decided, you know what, my best shot at achieving what I wanted to achieve is to just forget about who's running, forget about the other competition that's there, and run my own race. And that's exactly what I did. And thankfully, I was able to achieve my target. So when it comes to group running, and in this race, it's such a catch-22. I was in a position at one stage, do I run a bit faster to catch the group in front of me, but then I risk blowing at a later stage? Or do I stick in my current group and then at a later stage when I'm feeling strong, then run solo? And that's the option I went for. So very early on, there were a lot of groups in the beginning of the race. And group running helps a lot. You get the drag effect from the group. You share the work when it wasn't terribly windy, but when there is wind, you can obviously shelter behind other runners. So there are big benefits to running in a group within a race. However, I decided that I'm not comfortable enough to catch the group in front of me just yet, and I'm more comfortable to leave the group I'm in. And that was probably around halfway. So I worked in a group until halfway. The whole second half, I ran completely solo. And that was the best decision I could have made, because the group I was in actually ended up running a 2:27. I decided to take the risk at that point. I was feeling really good, go solo, and ran a 2:24. So if you're doing a race and conditions are super windy and they're a lot tougher than they were on this marathon day, then you may be better off sticking in a group till a lot longer before you open the tank, let's say maybe last 8 or 5 kilometers or so. However, given the fact that conditions were really actually quite good this day, I decided that I'm a lot better off at that point, at the halfway mark when I felt really good. I'm a lot better off just going for it by myself. Risking obviously running the whole second half solo, doing the work by myself. But like I said, in this race it paid off. If conditions are good in a future race and there's no group, well, I'm going to continue to do the same thing. So I guess that's up to you to decide within the race whether you stick with the group or whether you're actually better off going solo and running completely comfortable pace. Tip number 5, and my final tip. So this one, you may have heard from me before, but it's a morning routine that I do every day. I did this religiously in the build-up to the marathon, pretty much every single day, including marathon day. So what it is, it's just a 10 to 15 minute routine that I do, that I'm constantly evolving and changing to address areas of weakness. It's on my website if you'd like to have a look at it. I often encourage runners to look at mine, but to do your own thing. We all have different areas of weakness. Previously, it was my calf and Achilles area. I've given a lot of love and attention to that area, and I've strengthened that area a lot. And it's just constantly evolving. So let's say I might have some hamstring issues. Well, then for the next few weeks, I'll give more love and attention to my hamstrings. So it's a 10 to 15 minute routine that I've done every day, like I said, in the build-up to marathon and on marathon day. And it just helped me build such a strong and solid foundation that my body was able to sustain the pace pretty much throughout the whole race. And a lot of it's down to this morning routine, building a strong core, doing a lot of that stretching, foam rolling, strength work that you wouldn't necessarily do outside of your normal running schedule. And it's just those small things that once again go such a long way. I will continue to do this. I might even add an extra 3 minutes per day, given the fact that my targets increase, but I cannot stress the importance of this and the routine that you should try and get your body into. In the beginning, it feels like a lot of hard work, but once you get into it, it feels like second nature. And I spent a lot of minutes doing this routine. Some days I really wanted to do it. Some days I really didn't want to do it, but I knew that if I do it every day and it gives me a chance of crossing that finish line in under 2 hours and 25 minutes, well, then it's going to be worth every flipping second. Thankfully I did, and it was worth every second. So yeah, I encourage you to do your own morning routine. It's something that'll help me a lot, and I'm sure it's something that'll help you a lot as well as a runner.